Hello there, my name is Japheth Mast, and welcome to the Make Life Awesome podcast. I'm the Ex-Amish photographer with the funny name and the crazy hair, but trust me, there's a whole lot more to me than just that. In this podcast, I really hope to show you my heart more than what's in my head, because that's where all the really beautiful stuff is. I'm so glad you're here. Let's jump in to learning together what it looks like to make life awesome. Hey guys, just wanted to leave a quick note at the beginning of this episode. Just want to say thank you so much for following along. We are at episode 13, which is really cool and kind of crazy to think that I've been doing this for a couple months, however long that is. But yeah, thank you so much for leaving reviews on iTunes. Just blown away by some of the feedback I've heard. So thank you so much. And this episode is honestly probably my favorite that I've recorded with my good friend and mentor and just kind of father, Andrew. He's got some incredible wisdom to share on finding your why and getting a vision for your life that allows you to be motivated and disciplined in the present while reaching for a massive dream and a massive future. He also has some great dating and marriage advice, which is really good. He recommends some awesome books, which I will have in the show notes at japhethmast.com/show notes. So without further ado, enjoy this episode with Andrew Eriksen. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am sitting here with Mr. Andrew Eriksen in his lovely house, and we're going to chat a bunch of things we'll talk through and have a fun conversation. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on with you. It's always good to get to hang out, and this is a fun way to do that.
So. We met in a coffee shop 4 years ago.
Yeah,
some business event, just randomly connected, and
that's right. I think it was after Dale Partridge, wasn't it?
Yeah, Dale Partridge event.
Yeah, I don't know. You just struck me as just being a guy that I wanted to know, and it's proven to be right. Like you really have impressed me just with what you've done in your short years here on Earth. I mean, just the fact we started talking about books, and you had read a lot of the same books, and so yeah, it's always been encouraging to see what you've been up to, and now you're interning for a good friend of mine, which I found out randomly, so yeah, it's been fun. I'm excited to see where life takes you, and happy to be on here with you. So
thank you. Maybe let's start off with just a little bit of who you are, a little backstory, and kind of where you came from, where you're at now, whatever you want to share.
Sure. So obviously I'm in Redding, where this podcast is being recorded. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and moved here about 4 years and something. Moved out to Redding. Still have the business based in Florida. Came out here with my wife and 3 kids, and we did school out here. We just really made a home. We love it. Love the community. Love the people. Most of the time, love the weather. So the good thing is there's no humidity, which is a real killer in Florida. So we've been out here going on 5 years, and like I said, the business that I have now is really the second kind of big company that I've started or been a part of. The first one was when I was 21, and really I can say that this current company was kind of spawned from that first company. It's still in the healthcare field, which is what the first company was. It was actually, the first company was a recruiting company, and prior to that I was actually, of all things, I was a BMW technician. And I love working on cars still. I don't find as much time to do it these days, but I love building and the satisfaction of fixing a problem and then seeing the results, them driving away in a car that you basically rebuilt or engine you rebuilt. Most people know what an M3 is, and I was basically the chief technician for the M3s that came out in the early 2000s. I don't know how many engine jobs while I was there. I was the main person in Florida and Jacksonville doing those. So yeah, I did that first company. Was doing that for a couple of years and ended up getting hired by one of my clients. So I was doing recruiting for a medical practice in Jacksonville, and the CFO of that practice ended up basically getting fired. That he had some things happen with his assistant and some different integrity issues, and so they let him go. And I had a relationship with him at the time as a vendor on the outside, and met with the physician owner, and I don't know what they saw in me, but there was something there to the point where they wanted to hire me as to replace that guy. And I had no management experience. I wasn't even, I never even managed an employee. And then I immediately came in and was responsible for close to 30 employees. And
how old were you at this time?
I was able to drink beer. So, so let's say, I guess I was 21, probably getting ready to turn 22. Or maybe I had just turned 22. And so I think even at that time, I was the youngest person in the business. And so, every employee that reported to me was actually older than me. And that was actually a real struggle early on. And only in the past handful of years have I gotten over that, of being young, and not feeling like, not valuing what I had to say, as much as other people valued it, or as I should have valued it myself. So, I was 22. I did that for a couple years and really achieved kind of that first level of financial success. I started the company. I bought my first home when I was 20, which mainly was from doing some eBay business when eBay first started, and then working on cars. But I used the money from refinancing the house to start the first company. And really the reason behind starting it, and one of the things that I thought was important to talk about, was kind of the why behind it, what you do, and having a why that is big enough to take you through struggles and issues that are inevitably going to come up. And so my initial why was, growing up in a family of entrepreneurs. We had good years, but we had a lot of really tough years financially. And so, having to buy all of your clothes from Goodwill, and most of them are like, some of the stuff I wore, I just can't believe I made it through middle school and high school. So that was the first why. And so by about 22, or somewhere in there, 22, 23, I was doing really well, probably like, I don't know, 180,000 a year or something like that, 170,000. Obviously taxes and all that came out. And so I felt like at that time that I had achieved a level of success that I wanted and that I had desired. But what I found was that success really it didn't satisfy me the way that I thought it would. I was working a ton of hours. I had so much stress and anxiety. I couldn't really sleep at night. So the only way I found that I could sleep is I started listening to the Bible or something. And even then I would still just have very poor nights of sleep. And so by that time I was newly married, and we weren't doing great relationally. We were doing okay, but what happened was my wife got pregnant, and so we ended up having our daughter, who's now about to turn 11. And it was when she was in the hospital. The business that I was running was doing well, but the owner of it wanted to relocate to Texas. And so I was trying to find actually a buyer, trying to meet with people throughout the state to see if they wanted to acquire the business. And it was just, again, a bottle of stress. And so we had our daughter, and I remember being in the hospital and realizing like, okay, I had 2 weeks off and then I was back to work, and I wasn't going to really get to spend hardly any time with my daughter or my wife. And that's kind of one of the things that I realized that I missed out on in my childhood was my dad was constantly working. He was always gone. And so I actually left the hospital. My wife was still there, and I met with the owner of the company, and, you know, basically told him like, hey, I can't do this anymore. And so I went from doing really well and then to making like nothing. And I didn't quit without a plan. I think a lot of people make the mistake of like just acting off emotion and quitting. And I always, you know, I just don't know when that's a good idea. Obviously if you're doing something that, like if there's some kind of issue where you strongly disagree with whoever's running the company because of illegal or immoral issues, that's one thing. But typically it's just because of a disagreement or a you know, a fight or some kind. So I had what I had been doing was I'd been working all those hours running that company, but in the what I would call spare time, which is basically like midnight to 3 a.m., I was working on another company that did essentially some of what I was doing, but did it as a consultant, and it would allow me to make my own schedule and all this stuff. And so when I quit, I already I knew that I could get a few clients that would benefit from my service. Well, I did immediately. I got a great client right away. But it did end up working out for, I don't even remember really why. Basically, I think they hired someone internally eventually. And so I really did. I went about 6 months without making any money. And I thought I had everything together. But what I realized was that I had allowed so much pride to come in where I almost thought I was invincible. I thought I can do this. Like, I could pretty much do anything, because at that point I wasn't afraid of a challenge. It wasn't something that you could throw at me where I wasn't willing to take a chance and do it. It's not to say that my first handful of weeks at that job weren't incredibly challenging, stressful, scary, all the above. But I still knew that I could do it. And so I had a lot of belief in myself, but that belief kind of morphed into being very prideful. And I had a couple people, I love, there's this thing in business, like a continuous feedback loop. And what I've always tried to do is allow people to provide feedback to me, and so that feedback, I had asked a couple people, that I trust. I said, like, what do I need to work on? Like, what are some things that maybe are in my blind spot that I need to focus on? And both of them, said the only thing that they really saw was pride. They might have mentioned something else, but their number one was pride. And I did not think I was prideful. I thought I was one of the most humble guys on earth, which is usually the case. So I had a real humbling experience for about 6 or 8 months, had a newborn, couldn't afford to buy anything, diapers, had to borrow money from family and friends to cover groceries. I ended up having my brand new truck repossessed. We ended up having to do a short sale on my house. The market also kind of crashed. This is back in 07, 08. And so the market kind of tanked around that time. And so ended up doing a short sale on the house. we ended up finding a place to rent, but mainly we were staying a lot in my wife's family's basement up in Atlanta. And I just really came back to the Lord just really with a humble heart and really, said, basically allowed him access to back into my heart to direct my steps, and really worked on humility and being thankful for where we were at, not having this grandiose idea of what I needed to do in order to be somebody. It was always like I felt like I had to accomplish all these things and do all these things in order to feel valued and all of that. And so, started this company and started out really small, didn't go into any debt starting it. The first company, I was about $60,000 or $80,000 in debt. This company was completely bootstrapped. And we hired our first employee, I guess back in 2008-ish. And now we have close to, I think about 28 team members across the country full time, and then some other part-time help. And what we do is kind of technical, but it's basically, we work with insurance companies on the healthcare side and with physician offices, hospitals, all of that across the country. And, but what's interesting is the way I figured out this particular business was I was sitting in front of the computer, and literally I'm just reading, I'm just digesting all this information in the healthcare field. I'm just taking in as much as I can, much content as I can. I'm just reading, learning as much as I can, because I didn't really know which direction I was going to go. And so I was just investing in myself, heavily investing in myself. And I'm sitting in front of the computer, and literally a domain name pops into my head. And so I look it up. It's available. I buy it. I've learned how to build websites. I learned how to build a website, and build a website. And then within a few weeks, maybe even 2 weeks, we get our first client, because the domain name actually put the website at the top the search rankings. At that time, there was I had no idea about this, but there was a way, depending on what your domain name was, if somebody looked up that keyword that was in your domain, your website would rank really high. And so it did. And we had our first client within a couple of weeks. And honestly, I didn't know how to do the business that I started. So I was pretty much up a creek, and was trying to find a paddle. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I didn't think it was going to happen so fast. And so I started trying to figure it out. And I immediately just started praying and saying hey, I really need somebody to come in and help. Didn't even know what to ask for, because I had very limited understanding of what needed to be done. But anyways, this lady emails me out of just randomly through our website and says, "Hey, do you need any part-time help?" And she was exactly what I needed. And she actually just so happened to be, not far from where the client that signed up for our services. The client was actually in Indiana. So it wasn't even, I was in Florida, they were in Indiana, and and so it wasn't even just the fact that I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know the state that I was working in. I had no clue what was there. At least I knew a little bit in Florida. So anyway, she comes on and helps, and really saves things. We ended up having a great relationship with that first client, and then from there, just client after client after client. And so, now we service probably 2,500 providers on a monthly basis, throughout the country. We've worked with some of the biggest names in healthcare, and it's been a lot of fun, mostly. So I don't know if you having questions about that. I can kind of jump in a couple other things, but that's a little bit. That's in a nutshell the kind of the history of on the business side, and kind of taking you fast forward to where we're at now.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot happened in your life in a short amount of time.
you were talking about having a strong why. Mm-hmm. What why did you start out with, and then how did that transform and change to today?
Yeah, so the initial why was really all built around making money. So it was financial success, financial freedom. I had read a lot of books on, I'd read Warren Buffett's biography when I was like 15. I read obviously like books like Rich Dad Poor Dad, all these books. And my idea of success and happiness was I'm going to retire by the time I'm 30. I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30, and I'm going to retire, shortly thereafter. And I felt like, so my ambition and drive was all connected to finances, and whatever the fastest kind of path to that financial success, that was the way I was going to take. And so now, or really like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, what happened was, like I said, my daughter was born, and that the why became not really tied to money in some ways, but not because I needed money to be happy. I only wanted to be successful so that I could spend time with my family, so I could be available. I could, go to field trips or take off work and just hang out at the house one day if I'm, wanting to. And honestly, that's still where I'm at now. I mean, that's the kind of my kind of top priority is to be both financially secure, but have a level of freedom that allows me to spend time with my kids. And honestly, the culture that we built as a company is to do the same for all of our team members. We have at least 5 or 6. We have 6 single moms that work for us. We have a few that take care of their parents, and then everyone else, it's a lifestyle thing. Our position, they may be able to go somewhere and make, maybe 5 to 10% more money somewhere, but they're not going to get the lifestyle typically that we are able to give them, because that's really what we're built around, is being able to allow, a lot of them, they'll go on vacation and they'll travel somewhere, and they don't have to work, but a lot of them choose to, because they enjoy what they do and they enjoy the flexibility that comes with it. And so, it's interesting to see how my own why, has really been somewhat of a catalyst for growth, and, especially employee satisfaction, happiness, all that stuff, because, most of them have the same values of wanting to be more control of their time, have more control over their time. So I think one thing it's important to recognize, or to really define early on, is what success looks like, and kind of the why. So once you define what success looks like for you, and usually the way you can do that is, what goals do you have? Really, you have kind of success is the top of the pyramid, but what builds it are, the goals and the desires that are within you. And, there's a quote, I think it was, I don't remember who said it, but it's success is where preparation meets opportunity. But I kind of changed it to be success is where preparation aligns, or meets an opportunity that aligns with your goals. And so, success is a lot of times about preparing for the unknown. We don't know. I didn't know life would take me on this course. And I really, a lot of times things happen you can't control. The thing you can control is, developing yourself. I mean, one of John Maxwell's books, Developing a Leader Within You. It's a great title, and it is a big deal, because you may not be able to prepare for everything, but you can certainly prepare for a lot. I mean, even the simple things of, I knew I wanted to be married. I knew I wanted to have kids. Does that mean that I waited to be married or waited to have kids to actually prepare for it? No. I went to every family conference, read books, did podcasts, and I'm like a single dude, learning about what married sex looks like, or, how to be the best father. And so I think in the same way, if you know that you want to do something in business, or even just in a career, but you're not really sure what it looks like, that doesn't mean you can't actually start investing in yourself. I think that's really one of my kind of linchpins of success was, how much I have and always like invest in myself. And that's what connected us, honestly, was we both went somewhere where, it was a evening event. There could have been a million other things we could have done to spend our time. We heard there was a speaker in town. He wrote a really interesting book, and we went and invested in ourselves. And and so I think that regardless of what you think or where you think life is going to take you, I just think it's imperative that you take a moment and and if you're not sure if you're not disciplined enough to do it, like routinely, without being reminded, I think it's really important to have a schedule. Early on, I used to have I used to block out, and I would have dedicated like 2 hours a day where it's just whatever else is going on, I'm only doing this in these 2 hours, and so coming up with a schedule of, investing in yourself, and maybe even taking like a month. This month, I'm going to focus on just being the best person, being the best kind of friend, or, communication skills, all those things. Like, it's just crazy how, there's just so much you can do before you get on center stage to prepare for it. There's just so much that you can do, so that when that moment does come, you are ready for it, or you're at least more prepared than maybe the next person in line for it. So,
yeah. A lot of good stuff in there. There's a quote, like, you'll regret, in a year from now, you'll regret not starting today. Mm-hmm. The concept of investing in yourself and preparing ahead of time. I thought it was really interesting what you said about when you're single, like studying, investing in yourself, about marriage and kids, mm-hmm. and all of that. I think that's so far off the radar, or the radar for most people. Yeah. And can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure.
Like why?
Yeah. Like, why, if you're single, do you want to go to sit in a conference with a bunch of married people, where typically that would elicit like a feeling of, I wish I had what they had, like envy or something. But the why, again, for me, is I knew that a core value of mine was, and a goal of mine, I should say, was to be a dad and to be a husband. I knew early on, 16 years old, that was definitely something that I was looking to. And in fact, I was engaged when I was 18, which is, I have 3 kids, one with one more on the way, and the idea of them being engaged when they're 18 is somewhat scary. But it didn't end up working out. She actually cheated on me, and ended up going in a different path with her life. But even with that heartbreak, I still knew it didn't change what was in me, and that was being that I wanted to be a dad and a husband. And so what I saw a lot of people doing was kind of like they waited until their number was called. I saw the other day, my team is the Jaguars, and we had our backup quarterback come on after Nick Foles went down with an injury, and he came on and did amazing. He had one of the highest percentage completion ratios ever for first time starting. It was like 88% completion rate. But if he would have been, I mean, the idea that you can go into that moment of whether it's marriage or anything else, without being prepared is just crazy. I mean, as important as being a dad and being a husband is, and for me, it was very important. Like the thought that I would just go into it blindly and not have prepared for it, would be the equivalent of that backup quarterback going on there and like not knowing any of the plays, and just coming out there, not knowing what the heck he's doing. And I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted, if anything, my wife to be like, holy man, this guy is amazing. Like how he, and I don't know, even like when it comes to being a dad, like if maybe my wife wasn't going to be as prepared as I was for, and you can't prepare for everything, but there are things that you can prepare for. Like why not do it if you know that it's something that you want to do? If you want to, I mean, this, but I race cars. But part of me getting to the point where I became a great race car driver was racing go-karts and understanding cars and how they handle and how to how engines work and all that stuff. And so but yeah, I think it's important. I mean, in this day and age, it's like it just doesn't seem to be a priority. Everybody wants to meet that person and get married and all this, but typically what they would consider preparing is like going out to a coffee shop 5 times a week to see if a new person comes in. So
doesn't work.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, you're talking about aligning yourself with your dreams. Like you don't wait until your number's called.
Yeah.
Tying your current actions to where you want to go in a way. And yeah, I think it goes back to your knowing your why, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, developing a plan, like a plan of success. Like, I mean, that everybody knows, but failure to plan is plan to fail. I mean, it's just so true. Like, develop. One of the things that I wrote down just after I was saying preparing for fatherhood and marriage is you'll often, I'm shifting a little bit, but you'll often find, a lot of times I remember wanting to know what my purpose was, wanting to uncover and it was around like the time when Purpose Driven Life was, when Rick Warren wrote that book and I went to some of the classes and of course I read the book. I think I've read it like 3 times now, but finding your purpose, was a real big theme back then. It still is, but what I kind of identify with is, that you often find purpose within your passions. And like, I knew I was passionate about being a dad and being a husband. And part of my purpose is now I can see it clearly now. It's in the legacy I'm going to leave behind with my children, and teaching other men and couples. I mean, my wife and I have done counseling. We're not counselors, but we've done a lot of counseling over the years with friends, and even it's something that I really enjoy. And we were just talking the other night, just saying like, it's just crazy how, sometimes we've just have seen couples that don't fight hard enough for their marriage or for their relationship. And so pursuing, rather than pursuing your purpose when it's kind of this nebulous thing and you can't really identify it, going after stuff that you are passionate about, just like you with photography and the media stuff. I mean, you are pursuing that, and as you go down that road, there's going to be opportunities that come up, and you're going to feel like, and there's just like almost that click that happens inside of you where you're like, man, it's like the Joel Osteen book, Your Best Life Now. It really feels like when you get in that stride, where your passions have aligned, or that coincide with your purpose, there's this thing inside you that clicks. And that doesn't mean that, I think the other thing that I'll say though, is that doesn't mean that, it always is your job choice or career where your purpose is, or where you feel the fulfillment. I think a lot of times people, especially, younger generation, they make the mistake of, okay, I've got to find this perfect job where all my desires are fulfilled and that I'm passionate about, that I enjoy, and all this. When a lot of times it might be something that you're doing outside of that, or your job allows you the opportunity to pursue something you're passionate about, like traveling or whatever it is, And so, yeah, I would say, and then the other thing that I had here that is just being thankful. I would say one of the things that set apart me early on, I would say there's many things, but two things is being thankful. I recognize that when I was in that first kind of season of success, the carrot was always moving. So it was always like I would get to this point, and then I would realize, okay, no, I got to get there to be happy, or I got to get there to feel this success. And instead of having a little bit of reflection and saying like, hey, I'm so thankful, I'm so grateful, thank you for this, where I'm at right now. The other one was what I think about, and I had this come to me right before the podcast, and I was like, where is this from? And thankfully I remembered, and I found it, but it's the boomerang principle. I'm going to do a little quiz on you. Do you know where it's from?
No.
Oh, come on. I know you. I'm pretty sure you read the book. John Maxwell.
No, it's ringing a bell now.
Okay. All right. Well, I put you on the spot. I'm sorry. So it's in the book, Winning with People. Yes. And in that book, and Today Matters, I read when I was a BMW technician, before I had a business or had any idea that I was, what business was going to be like. But I desired to be better with people. And so earlier, when I was just praying and thinking about this podcast, I thought, what are some things? And boomerang principle came up, and I'm like, honestly, I couldn't even remember. I felt like I knew what it was, like that I could explain it, but I was like, I didn't know what book it was from or anything else. And so I felt like it was from Winning with People. So I picked it up, found it, and what it is the best way to help yourself is to help others. And there's three different types of people. You have takers, traders, and investors. And so the takers are, those that are just out for relationships, for what they can get from it. They really care nothing for that other person or whatnot. A trader is, I'll help you if you help me. Like, it's basically just, and there's a lot of people like that. They'll help you if there's something in it for themselves. Yeah. And if there's not, then they won't give you the time of day. And then the last is investors who the investors realize that basically there's value beyond, getting something directly, like in investing in someone. So like me investing in you, or you investing in me, there's value long-term in that. And just being a good person, and not always having to think about yourself. I had somebody, and this is crazy. So I was at and I know we need to kind of end it. So maybe I'll end on something more positive. So maybe you can ask me some kind of like cool question. But I was at an event recently, and I'm a kind of a quiet, you know who I am, and and all of that. But most people, I'm very unassuming, I should say. Like I don't, yeah, I don't wear fancy rings or fancy watches, or drive fancy sports cars and all that. And I don't post on Instagram every time I'm hanging out with a friend that's, famous, doing air quotes. So this guy comes up who I know, and I've hung out with him some, and he's like, what are you doing? And I was telling him I'm on this leadership team with some of the guys, and he says to me, and granted, this is a guy that I've known for a couple of years now, and we've actually done some things together, like with our kids and stuff. And so he's a good dude. But he literally said to me, if I would have known you were so connected, then we would have hung out a long time ago. And one of my buddies was next to me, who's also on this leadership board. There's only 5 of us. And the guy walked away, and we just looked at each other and we just shook our heads. And I actually talked to one of the other guys. I said, listen, like, this is what was said. And you know, what's crazy is I didn't tell him who it was. I had this same thing happen with a good friend of mine and this other guy who I'll leave nameless, who is a leader in the community. And I didn't tell him who it was, but both of them knew just by what I said who it was. And that is a person who is all about a trade. He's basically a trader, a taker. And so he won't give someone the time of day unless there is some value in it for himself. And that attitude, it may take you down the road a good bit, but you're going to end up there, and you're going to look around, you're going to be by yourself. Because when the crap hits the fan, you know, it's the people that you've poured into, and it's the true friends that you have around you that stand by you and help you when those times get tough. And I needed a lot of friends over the years, you know, just in business and personal life. And we've had some traumatic things happen over the years. And man, just really thankful that I had some good people around me who they loved investing in me, and I loved investing in them. But what me investing in them was, or getting something from them, was never a prerequisite for hanging out or, you know, pouring into them. So yeah, I know it's a lot, man. I could talk probably all day. But my throat says that I shouldn't. And I'm sure your listeners have about had it, but, it's been good. Yeah.
So rich. So rich. So to wrap it up, should I ask this?
I can keep it short.
Can you do like a 30-second advice to single people?
Sure.
If you want, if you have anything to say.
Heck.
Who are wanting to not be single forever.
So one thing I would say is purity. When I was single, you know, coming from a couple bad relationships, I was single, and my focus was on purity of thought and purity of actions, and to the point where when I met my wife, I went up to her at this retreat, and I said, I feel like I know you. I met you somewhere. And her mind went to, he's just trying to get to know me because he wants to go on a date. When actually, like, in my head, at that time, I had actually I was only going to her and saying, I feel like I know you from somewhere. Like, did we meet? Excuse me. And so having purity of thought in your interactions with the opposite sex. And I was in a place where I can honestly say, like, it was probably the most lust-free, just free in so many ways, time that I can remember, which I don't struggle with lust now, but except for my wife. So that's why I can say, like, I had no one to lust after when I was single, and it was about a year. And honestly, I know there's a lot of people that have been single for many, many years, and they're desiring that. But I would say focusing on purity, being, and what that will allow you to do also is to, when you are talking to someone, the motives of your heart will be so pure that, that's what will shine through. A lot of times people, you know, get approached, and the motives sometimes impure. But the other thing that I'll just finish by saying is, like, I mean, if you haven't read, like, the was it Chapman, the Love Languages? Yeah, if you haven't read that, or if you haven't read a book on on marriage, or I think that you should start there and start investing in yourself. But even basic books like Winning with People, or the title of this is kind of sucks, but How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah. Books like that just help you to be a better, like, just be better at being a friend and being communicating, things like that. But yeah, and then when the opportunity comes, I remember calling my wife and asking her on the first date, and it was really scary. I was super nervous. One of the first things we did, though, after about a month of hanging out, we hung out with friends first, like all the time. We were in the same group. And then eventually it led to us dating. But within the first month, I basically told her, like, hey, I'm not dating to date. This is like a courtship for me. Like, I'm interested in getting married. And so, it's like DTR, define the relationship. I defined what my goal was for this relationship. And if it aligned with hers, then great, we'll keep going. If it didn't, then I didn't want to waste a bunch of time going down a road that was going to be a dead end. So hopefully that helps somebody out there. And other than that, just pray. Because I know it can be tough, especially when everyone around you seems to have this or that, and you're single and like, I just waiting on that right connection. But what it ended up being my wife is what I realized later, and we talked about it, was there was just this moment of, I don't know, there's this clarity, or this, like, it was almost as if in my eyes, I could see a light shining on her, like a spotlight was on her. And so just be like aware if somebody sticks out to you when you're hanging out with friends, or when you're somewhere, if somebody, like, all of a sudden you're like, you just notice someone. Don't be afraid to go and start a conversation, and I think that the best thing to do is just hang out as much as you can with friends and get to know people, and you'll know pretty quickly whether or not it's, a relationship you want to pursue. Yeah. I've been married 12 years. And honestly, we have an amazing marriage. Not to say we don't struggle sometimes, but man, we really do have a great marriage, and just really thankful for that. But we've invested a lot into ourselves and into each other. So
yeah,
I think it's good.
Good stuff. Hopefully she does too.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm gonna end it, but man, thanks so much for being on the show, sharing your heart, your life.
Yeah,
this is good.
For having me.
It's good.
Love you, dude.
Love you. All right. Bye. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I would love if you would leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting platform, as it really does help the show out. You can find me on Instagram at Japheth Mast, that's spelled JAPHETHMAST, or my website, japhethmast.com. Have an amazing week, and don't forget, make life awesome.